Punchline.
What is your occupation, sir?
I'm a doorman.
You're a doorman, so like you hail taxis.
That's what I do, yes.
Okay, this is like a good training device, then.
Cocktail.
You gotta let me take your picture.
What for?
When you're a big celebrity, I'll put you in Rolling Stone magazine.
Right.
My protege. I discovered him.
Ah, that's great. Can you move aside, though? I can't fit you both in.
Keeps living at home.
Far north.
Now you have gone and gotten your stuff knocked up, and you don't even have a man, do you, Kate?
Oh! Where's your man, Rita?
I don't need a man.
What do these three movies have in common? Well, we think they're three of the worst movies of 1988, and so they'll be featured in our annual review of the low points of the movie year on this special edition of Siskel and Ebert. I'm Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times.
And I'm Gene Siskel of the Chicago Tribune. As in years past, our worst films lists are not comprised of little pictures that attempted and achieved nothing, but rather big pictures, or pictures with big stars that failed in a big way. We'll begin our case studies of the 1988 disasters with Punchline, a sorry excuse for describing the quite topical subject of amateur stand-up comics. Comedy clubs are a national phenomenon, but not because of losers like Sally Field and Tom Hanks in Punchline.
What about your husband? There's got to be some laughs there.
Not mine.
I bet there is. What does he do?
Sells insurance.
You win. How about your kids?
3 girls.
Okay, all right. Big, little, what? Nursery school, babysitters, maybe?
Oh, God. They're going to need one if I'm not home by 4.
All right, that's funny. Go with
There's
that.
nothing funny in that. Nothing. The maid will leave, and then the 2 little ones will be there all by
You have
themselves.
to think the comedy. Who's the babysitter?
Oh, just this kid that lives down the street. I don't even think I brought his
What's the
number.
babysitter's name?
I don't know. It's just
Comedy.
this nice kid.
What's the babysitter's name?
Charlie Manson.
All right! That's funny.
That's funny?
You just wrote a joke, yes.
They're boring. Hanks is supposed to be funny and isn't. Field isn't supposed to be funny and isn't. I never believed her as a frumpy housewife turned comic. Nothing in the picture worked for me. Take this movie, please.
You know the mistake they made? They didn't start with reporting of comedy clubs and try to make a movie about the life of stand-up comedians. Right. They started with a formula sitcom plot in which you start at the bottom and you fight your way up to the top, and they just tried to plug that into comedy clubs without having any good reporting about what really goes on.
I mean, you know, Tom Hanks is a favorite to be nominated for Big, so obviously he can act. Sally Fields won 2 Oscar nominations. That's how pathetic the script of this film is, that these 2 players were totally, I mean, they're complete washouts in this film.
For that matter, good actors though they may be, they're not stand-up comedians, and stand-up is an art, not a science that can be learned.
Apparently not.
Okay, next movie, and one of my choices for the year's worst films is Cocktail, a movie in which Tom Cruise started out as a bartender on New York's Upper East Side and was able to shake, stir, and blend so well that he wound up as a rich gigolo and a superstar bartender also. Here's a scene that will amaze anyone who has ever spent a serious amount of time in a bar. Brian Brown and Tom Cruise are doing things here that are probably impossible and certainly bad for business, since it's doubtful they can mix much more than a drink a minute.
1, 2, 3, go!
Really turned me off about Cocktail was the lack of consequences throughout this movie. Cruise got drunk every night. He went to bed with every woman who would have him, but he never seemed to get a hangover or get anything else for that matter. Cocktail felt more like a movie from the hedonistic 1970s than from today, when one of the things the movies probably ought to concede is that irresponsible actions can have consequences.
I had the same reaction. I was not only bored by the material in the film. I mean, Cruise's character did not interest me in any way, shape, or form, and possibly it's because just of what what you mentioned, which is you don't see the effect of what he does. You don't see these kids going out and being bombed and blasted on the street after they've been served all the drinks. You have that shot of the woman just hanging on the bar looking. I mean, it's really a love poem to excess and a completely irresponsible, boring movie.
The interesting character in the movie was the older bartender, the one played by Brian Brown, the one who did have to pay with his life eventually for the lifestyle he was leading, and he was much more complicated. But the movie basically was telling people of the Tom Cruise generation, you can burn all night and you'll never go down in flames.
You got it
Can't be done.
Right. Coming up next, Stealing Home, the movie where heartthrob Mark Harmon mostly stares off into space.
No, you don't understand. This is breaking and entering. This is like a major felony. That may not matter to you, because I know you're doing this Lost Generation, Jack Kerouac alienated kind of thing, but it does matter to me.
Continuing our special two-gun salute to the worst movies of 1988, I am reminded that this was the year of the baseball film. And not only good baseball films like Bull Durham and sincere baseball films like 8 Men Out, but also bad baseball films too. Films like the sickeningly sentimental Stealing Home. This was the movie where Mark Harmon played a broken-down ex-pro baseball player who was called home to dispose of the ashes of his childhood friend, played in flashbacks by Jodie Foster. But then the whole movie seems to be played in flashbacks, and it doesn't help that you can't even tell some of the characters that are being flashed back to, can't even tell them apart one from another.
See Robin last night? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And? And what? And did you mention the prom?
No.
And did you mention me at all?
Perhaps I couldn't because her mother was in
And
the
you had
house.
sex with her. You had sex with my prom date.
Albie,
Oh, God.
Albie, I didn't. I'll talk to her tonight.
Why talk to her, Bill? Why don't you just go over there and have some more sex with her?
Stealing Home was a real squirmer, a movie so dripping with bathos and pathos and phony sentiment that even during the most emotional upheavals in this film, I felt like shouting sarcastic remarks right back at the screen. In fact, I think I did shout a sarcastic remark or two back to the screen. I hate movies that have no shame, that hang their emotions right out to dry, and I hate them even more when they ask all sorts of questions like, why did this poor girl have to kill herself? And then they give no answers except possibly that they needed her ashes as a prop for the movie.
Well, what's going to happen to the ashes becomes almost a run. It's perverse, but it becomes a running joke if you sit through this whole movie. I mean, you know what's going to happen, and you're just waiting.
What should I do with her ashes? Maybe I should take them back to the sacred place where that we had. Yeah, you know, which you could tell him in the first 10 minutes of the movie, and he could have gone on and gone back and maybe had a new baseball career.
You could not predict in this movie. I mean, I sat there laughing quite loudly at the screen. You could not predict that a guy like Mark Harmon would walk through a script where basically what he does is every maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes, he goes to a point where he stares off into space and they cut to a flashback. I mean, do you realize he could have done that part in about 2 days? Yeah. Walk, 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 stare. Walk, stare.
Yeah.
I mean, nice going.
Jodie Foster, a wonderful actress, very good this year in The Accused. Yep. Totally at sea in this movie.
Okay.
Yeah.
My next lousy movie of 1988 is Far North, a vanity project written and directed by the highly regarded playwright Sam Shepard. The talented Jessica Lange leads a cast of fine actors through an annoying script about a family of nutcases, including a father who wants Lange to shoot the horse that was pulling his hay wagon when it tipped over. There's a lot of talk about killing the horse in this movie.
Now, what's the trick to it, anyhow? I mean, you know, say somebody wanted to shoot something with it.
You mean like a horse?
How do you aim it?
You see that bead up at the end of the barrel?
Yeah.
You line that up so it's right in the middle of the back sights. That's this V thing right there.
That's Tess Harper as Lange's sister. Gee, I wanted to see that horse killed to stop the artificial drama here. Shepard is renowned for writing about families with buried secrets, but in Far North, the secrets are all given away early. Stubbornness, pregnancy out of wedlock, alcoholism, and a script that is really bargain basement Eugene O'Neill. It's a stunningly bad movie, and badly directed, too. Might as well give him that shot as well.
Yeah, I was shocked. I have a feeling that the reason this became a Sam Shepard movie is that nobody else was interested in this material. It's completely disorganized. And there's one moment in the film where two of the characters who have just checked themselves out of a hospital or escaped from a hospital are walking down a railroad track in Minnesota in the middle of the winter in their hospital gowns, you know, on some kind of an insane mission. Apparently they walk about 80 or 90 miles. I don't know how far they walk. And then they get lost in the woods. And you're looking at it and you're saying, didn't anybody just look up from the script and say, Sam, what did you have in mind here?
Right. He had a bad movie in mind. Okay. Coming up next, Last Rites, possibly the most ridiculous and certainly one of the more offensive films of recent years about the subject of young priests in love.
Father Freddy, this is Angela. What's your last name?
The worst movies of 1988. How about a bad horror comedy called Vibes, starring the talented Jeff Goldblum, Cyndi Lauper, and Peter Falk? The film's premise is okay, about a gathering of psychics, but then Vibes turns into a routine chase film, a pale ripoff of Romancing the Stone, as Peter Falk tries to use the psychic powers of Lauper and Goldblum to find a hidden treasure.
There. You're sure? Positive. Whoever wore this shirt went off in that direction.
What's wrong?
This isn't your son's shirt.
Sure it is.
No. This shirt's only been worn by one man, an older man, much too old to be your son.
Did I say my son? No, I'm sorry. I'm his son. It's my father that's missing, Harry Sr.
Not one of those talented people has a fresh character in this film. Goldblum is forced into a parody of his typically weird roles. Lauper is a cartoon, too, and the always reliable Peter Falk isn't reliable this time, shouting a role that just isn't funny.
You know what I think happens with movies like this? I think a lot of these screenwriters go to screenwriting classes where they learn the formulas for successful movies. Then when they come up with a good idea, they plug it into the formula. The first scene in this movie is funny,
wonderful.
Where Jeff Goldblum and Cyndi Lauper are being tested for their psychic abilities, right. And Goldblum in particular is able to put a real kind of, satirical spin on it. Right. But then suddenly the movie takes all of the abilities for real and turns into, as you point out, just another chase with a hidden treasure.
It's Romancing the Stone. I mean, that's how the project.
Why doesn't anyone in Hollywood go ahead and write a whole screenplay? Why would an executive produce a movie that's a whole screenplay about something instead of just another version of a plugged-in formula?
I think that in the pitch meetings where they try and sell this stuff, they said, look, we're going to take psychics and we're going to do something just like Romancing the Stone. So everybody starts chanting Romancing the Stone, because that made a lot of money, and that's the mentality.
A funny movie could be made about psychics.
You bet.
Funny
This
movie.
wasn't it.
And this wasn't it. My next choice among the year's worst films is a particularly offensive thriller named Last Rites that starred Tom Berenger as a priest at St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York. He is also the son of the top mafia boss of New York City, but because the movie is told so incompetently, you go through most of the film not even knowing that crucial piece of information. Berenger's sister at the beginning of the film kills his brother-in-law, although for that matter we don't necessarily know it's his sister either. Right. And then the brother-in-law's girlfriend throws herself on Berenger for mercy and also for whatever else might come along.
You knew who I was. Gino would have had to tell you about me, and you knew I was the one person that could help you out of this.
Gino? You know Gino?
Don't bull me.
I swear in the Madonna, Padre, I don't know what you're talking about.
You didn't know who I was.
Pace, you said your name was Father Michael Pace.
In inglese, in italiano mi nome si pronuncia Pace.
Just as a matter of curiosity, when was the last time a Hollywood movie had a handsome young priest who did not fall in love? This movie, like so many others, uses the vow of celibacy and the secrets of the confessional as simple movie gimmicks. The only reason the character is a priest is so that the plot can make a few titillating points by playing with his sanctity. Now that's offensive, but the movie is such an exercise in stupidity that it would make the list even if the hero were working outside the cathedral selling hot dogs on the street. The fact that you don't even know the crucial relationships in this movie because the narrative is so incompetently bungled is amazing.
I assume that what they were trying to do is keep us in suspense and trick us, but at a certain point it becomes so frustrating that when the payoff is so late, their timing is just simply off in the way the story was written. Coming up next, a big budget bust called Willow from George Lucas and Ron Howard.
All creatures of good heart need your help, Willow.
This special program on the year's worst movies, my next film probably sounds a lot more entertaining than it was. It's called Heartbreak Hotel, and it starred Charlie Schlatter as a kid who decides to kidnap Elvis Presley as a present for his mom who needs some cheering up. He seduces Elvis out of his hotel by using a look-alike of Elvis's dead mother as a decoy, and now in this scene he dresses up Elvis in some of his own father's old clothes.
These are your dad's clothes, huh?
Yep.
Me and him must be about the same size. That's the way I used to dress back in '56.
Yeah, man. My mama says you looked the coolest in '56.
She did, huh?
Yeah, '56. Except, I don't know, man. Something's wrong.
What are you talking about?
I don't know. It just doesn't look right.
Fine to me.
Looks fine, but something's just not right.
What do you think it is?
Buddy.
Well, I don't know.
Come
trim, huh? Maybe wash the black dye out? You dye your hair?
There were a couple of funny lines in the movie, and it was a great idea to use Tuesday Weld, one of Elvis's co-stars, in the role of the kid's mom. In fact, they even duplicate a scene from an old Elvis Presley movie. But the movie's fatal mistake was to try to turn this material into a sort of warm-hearted Frank Capra comedy in which we get unbelievable bedside scenes with Elvis trying to talk a little girl out of being afraid of the dark. After seeing this movie, I knew Elvis wasn't still alive, because if he was, he'd be suing.
You know, this picture is so silly that it may someday make it into our list of films that are so bad that they're good in some way. I mean, it is a laughable film, but you're right. When they try and make it serious, I mean, if you played it strictly for laughs, it could be a really campy, funny film. But as a serious picture, it just doesn't work at all.
And particularly since the actor who plays Elvis doesn't look at all like Elvis. They must have said, well, we need a dramatic performance here instead of a look-alike. And so at some point, you want the plot to turn, and it turns out the kid was taken in by an Elvis impersonator.
Yeah, if this had been put in the hands of the people who made Naked Gun and Airplane, and they did their Elvis imitation with Top Secret, this could have been a very funny picture, intentionally funny. Our final big bomb of 1988 is a heavy-duty and quite dreary production of Willow, the would-be sword and sorcery tale told by producer George Lucas and director Ron Howard. Willow turns out to be a turgid recycling of the Star Wars story. Instead of Luke Skywalker, we follow a dwarf named Willow in his battle to save the universe by protecting a baby princess.
Elora Danan has chosen you to be her guardian.
Me?
Yes, she likes you. And Elora Danan knows you have the courage to help us. Take my wand, the sorceress Rizal. She will guide you and Elora Danan to the kingdom of Tirazli, where a good king and queen will look after you.
You need a warrior for a job like this. I'm a nobody. Laura, you don't want me. Tell her. I'm short, even for Nelwyn.
Annie meets a Han Solo-type buccaneer played by Val Kilmer, and there are would-be cute little creatures called brownies that are pale imitations of R2-D2 and C-3PO. Everything is the same in this picture. The result is a formula adventure that worked when George Lucas first set it in outer space. This time it doesn't work in the all-too-familiar forests of the sword and sorcery genre. I'm tired of seeing epic pictures set in forests with lots of people running around and hitting each other over the head.
You know, the strange thing about this is that there were two movies that came out at about the same time, this movie and Roger Rabbit, which we both liked.
Right.
Roger Rabbit was more for adults. The kids didn't like it so much. Willow, which we didn't like, is very popular. It's the top-selling video, and it was big at the box office, despite its bad reviews, because little kids did like it, maybe because they hadn't seen it before.
Star Wars.
That's right. They hadn't seen it 100 times before. Now here's my complete list of the year's 10 worst movies in alphabetical order. Betrayed was supposed to be a brave political thriller, but the politics were unbelievable, and a racially charged scene was very offensive. Cocktail seemed to have been made by people who didn't know anything about drinking or much of anything else. The Deceivers asked us to believe that Pierce Brosnan could pass as a member of a murderous Indian killer cult simply by darkening his face and faking the native language. Far North was a disorganized and pointless exercise in leftover story ideas, the disappointing directing debut of playwright Sam Shepard. Heartbreak Hotel was the movie about the kid who kidnapped Elvis as a present for his mom. It was so bad in so many different ways, I almost felt sorry for it. Hellbound, Hellraiser II, is another one of those horror movies where it doesn't matter when you come in because nothing makes any sense anyway, and it's all a non-stop nightmare. Last Rites was a so-called thriller that was both inept and sacrilegious. Punchline was a film about stand-up comedy in which the parts that were not supposed to be funny were not funny, but then again, neither were the parts that were supposed to be funny. And Scrooged was the most cheerless and depressing, even hostile holiday movie I've ever seen. Then there was Stealing Home, that shameless exercise in meaningless and confusing flashbacks, all of them, of course, grief-stricken.
Okay, here's my complete list of the worst major films of 1988, starting off with the obnoxious Arthur II on the Rocks, with Dudley Moore trying half-heartedly to play sober. I didn't like Cocktail either. I'd like to start a chapter of a society called Film Critics Against Drunk Characters. Also, Far North by Sam Shepard. And then there was To Trot, a stunningly unfunny film about a talking horse and, what's worse, a talking man, Bobcat Goldthwait. Punchline with Sally Field and Tom Hanks stunk, as we pointed out already. Rent-A-Cop with Burt Reynolds, who manages to make this list every year, it seems. Tiger Warsaw, a film that Patrick Swayze would like to forget, and I already have. A Time of Destiny with William Hurt. And the unfunny psychic chase film Vibes. And finally, Willow, the boring sword and sorcery epic that bored youngsters and adults alike.
You know, there's a common thread that goes through a lot of these movies. It's the fact, as you mentioned earlier, that over and over again, what they're doing in Hollywood these days is looking for a formula that they can identify with a previous hit. The original screenplay, new from beginning to end, about characters we haven't met before, who do things we haven't seen done before on the screen, is an endangered species in Hollywood. Executives are afraid to touch it because they're afraid for their job.
And I'll tell you that the distinguishing character in the movies that are great has always been movies that are made from the heart rather than movies that are aimed out to please an audience. Make them from your heart, not from some statistics or some research group.
It's okay to please an audience, but please them from your heart. Don't please them from
please yourself first.
Retread of ancient formulas. That's it for this week. Next week we'll be back with reviews of Beaches starring Bette Midler and Barbara Hershey, and Dangerous Liaisons with Glenn Close, John Malkovich, and Michelle Pfeiffer. That's next week, and until then, the balcony is closed.
Raisinets and Goobers are playing everywhere, starring plump, juicy raisins and great golden peanuts. Both now feature creamy Nestle milk chocolate. Johnny Cat Premium Cat Litter. Johnny Cat and a little privacy is all any cat needs. Got a brand new VCR? Then you need the 1989 edition of Roger Ebert's Movie Home Companion. Tappan SureCook Space Saver Microwave is perfect for kitchens where space is at a premium. Tappan Touch Solid State Controls, Automatic Temperature Probe, and Wood Grain Decor. Furnished by Tappan.